This is the BBC.
Age banking. Anticipated gamete exhaustion banking. That's how Professor Geeta Nalgund defines the ability to put off motherhood, to freeze your eggs. Some say it's liberating. Others think it's risky. But age banking, egg freezing, whatever we call it, it's becoming more common. And morally and medically, it's complex.
I think the presentation of it as insurance is wrong. It's actually a kind of gamble on planned infertility.
I'm Rhianna Dillon, and today's seriously interesting story follows the women who choose to freeze their eggs. Fee Glover is our guide, but first we're heading to the clinic.
You will be taking the eggs, clean them, then put them in a calibration solution, and after calibration you put them into vitrification. You have already allocated the patient space. You just put it in one of those.
So my eggs are actually in one of these tanks?
Yeah, they are.
So they're not scrambled?
100% not scrambled. We don't do these things.
Georgina, age at which eggs frozen 34, eggs frozen 12, current age 37.
It's really interesting to see where the eggs have gone and how they're cared for afterwards.
When I first imagined having some of my eggs frozen, I think I was imagining a little box of 6, maybe 12 at a push. That was 16 years ago in New York City. I was in my early 30s and I was very single. Work was good, social life good, hair still bouncy, gums terrific. But I repeat, I was very single and my body clock had started to tick. Being NYC, where neuroses, freedom and relentless ambition all combine with intoxicating traffic fumes, I wasn't alone in my late-night anxieties of, is it really going to be just me and my cat? And out of the shadows was emerging a medical technology that promised to allay those fears, available to anyone who could pay for it. Egg freezing, also known as oocyte cryopreservation. I made some calls. Being a journalist, I asked a lot of questions. And can I ask, it may sound like a funny question, but then where do the eggs actually go? At the time, it all felt a bit reckless, like sending my ovaries out to the Wild West on a bareback horse, so I never took it any further. Thank you very much indeed. I'll have a think and get back to you. But I recognised the power of the promise in a frozen egg. It's like knowing you've booked a place on a life raft when the seas get choppy, and now the life raft is coming to a workplace near you.
Beautiful offices, free food, and now frozen eggs. Women working for Facebook and Apple are being offered the chance to have their eggs frozen.
In January 2014, Facebook CEO Sheryl Sandberg announced that US employees would be covered for up to $20,000 if they chose to have their eggs frozen.
There's a young woman working at Facebook who had got cancer. She came to me and said, that means I won't be able to have children unless I can freeze my eggs, and I can't afford it. And then we looked at each other and we said, well, why would we only cover this for women with cancer?
You know, we at Virgin want to steal the idea and offer to our women.
Richard Branson offered his stamp of approval for British employees.
If they haven't managed to find the man of their dreams at 36, 37, 38, freeze the eggs. It makes sense.
Despite his initial enthusiasm, the Virgin Empire is not yet offering this on its healthcare packages. But the fact that it is becoming part of corporate policy is hugely significant. The giants of our business age are the tech companies. So, if they say egg freezing is something that in the future many more people will choose, well, we need to listen. Google, Spotify and Salesforce all now offer egg freezing, though none of them would go on record to talk about it.
I decided to freeze my eggs a few years ago while working for a large technology company in California.
Aidan, age at which eggs frozen 30, eggs frozen 6, current age 31.
I wasn't at the time in a relationship with someone that I felt was the person I wanted to move forward with. And I was also interested in taking some further career risks and not sure if, the timing was right to have children. And so the ability to not have this clock ticking in the background, it was incredibly empowering.
By the time Aidan took up her company egg freezing offer in 2015, the numbers of women pursuing the procedure for their own use in America had increased from just over 550 women in 2009 to just over 7,550. The technology had improved too, with a new fast freezing method called vitrification. A new market emerged. Employers and employees needed a middleman, a broker, to draft contracts and match women with doctors and clinics.
My name is Karen Ajmani, and I am the president of healthcare services at Progeny.
Progeny was one of those companies, born in 2015 and billed by its former CEO as the Uber of the fertility industry. You might want to rate this interview.
I mean, employers look at this and they realize this attracts and retains their workforce, and that is important. It also sends a cultural message throughout the organization that they recognize and support women.
Can you talk me through the process where I phone you up and say, I'm the CEO of a small tech company called Fee Bubble in London, and you would say what?
Well, whether you're covering this type of service or not, you're paying for it. Either you have people that are struggling to have a baby and then going on their own to try less effective modes of family building, and this often leads to failures as well as a higher rate of multiples. We sign a contract with facilities around the country to perform the service, and we educate them about things like the success rates and what to expect during egg freezing. I mean, this is not just a primary fertility issue. This is for people who say, I'm going to get a job and I'm likely not going to be able to have my first child until I'm 34, 35, and I want 3 children. You know, I have 27-year-old eggs, so to speak, in the freezer. And so that's really what we're seeing. This is like an insurance policy for people.
And if this is an insurance policy, you have to be pretty sure you can guarantee the outcome. A baby. The first ice baby born from an egg frozen through vitrification was in 2010. 2 years later, the experimental label was lifted on egg freezing by the American Society for Reproductive Medicine, but there was a disclaimer.
There are not yet sufficient data to recommend egg freezing for the sole purpose of circumventing reproductive aging because there are no data to support the safety, efficacy, ethics, emotional risks, and cost-effectiveness of oocyte cryopreservation. Marketing this technology for the purpose of deferring childbearing may give women false hope.
I was single, I had a decent job, and I just was not meeting anyone, and I was getting, older and older.
Bridget, age at which eggs frozen 39, eggs frozen 11, current age 44.
You keep thinking, things are going to work out. This idea of motherhood that I've always had is going to materialize. And when it doesn't, and when the years march on, that's when I really decided that I needed to take some action.
Since she froze hers, Bridget's become the poster girl for egg freezing in the US, launching the first online cryopreservation community.
I'm so pleased that women who are younger are starting to say, hey, I have some options. I want to exercise these options. And, had I been given the opportunity in my early 30s or even late 20s, it would have taken a huge, immense load off that, I had these eggs on ice, I could use them when I wanted, and I could move on with a career and move on with meeting men at, a time I wanted to.
What advice were you given when you actually had your eggs frozen, Bridget? I mean, were the worst case scenarios really discussed as much as the best case scenarios?
Believe it or not, not a lot is discussed when you actually get to the clinic. And that is, something personally I've struggled with. I have 11 eggs frozen. I know this is not a guarantee. That being said, I do have a possibility. Whereas, had I not frozen my eggs, I would, at the age of 44 right now, really have no options. Unfortunately, we're at that point where we kind of need to rely on something that, is not a sure thing, but, maybe will provide a bit of relief or opportunity.
So we've come to the Create Fertility Clinic, which is in Cheapside, in the heart of the City of London. I can just see the top of St Paul's Cathedral behind me. Create Fertility is the largest private fertility clinic in Europe. We're going down to -1. And all of the people who are coming into this building, smart city worker types, Just for the record, I'm inappropriately dressed.
I'm Geeta Nagund, I'm Medical Director of Create Fertility.
So, Dr. Nagund, you have said that egg freezing is the second wave of emancipation for women after the contraceptive pill. Now, is this, from your experience and your expertise, a really proper moment in time for women's fertility?
I think it is very important for women, and I believe that egg freezing can give women an opportunity. Nature has created gender inequality when it comes to reproduction. For that reason, if women are not ready, and I see this in my medical practice all the time, women who haven't got a partner, they are actually in their mid to late 30s, who feel the clock is ticking faster and they don't want to lose out on being a mom with their own eggs. These women tend to be generally financially independent. They can pay for it.
Have you found recently that a lot more women are coming to you, possibly because egg freezing has been in the news with huge companies like Apple and Facebook putting it on their corporate healthcare?
I think it is a factor. There was an increased awareness, and more women started to explore. And actually, personally, I don't like to call it social egg freezing, and I'm quite opposed to that term because the term social degrades it to wish rather than the real need. I call it age banking, anticipated gamete exhaustion banking.
Compared to many other medical procedures covered by corporate healthcare, egg freezing is highly complex. So, in the interest of transparency, anyone embarking on this should know what's involved.
Step 1. Daily hormone injections for 2 or 3 weeks to suppress your natural menstrual cycle. Step 2. Daily follicle-stimulating injections for 12 days with regular ultrasounds to confirm size and growth of eggs. Step 3. A trigger injection to induce ovulation.
At which point you're sedated and your eggs are taken from you using a needle and then stored in liquid nitrogen. Once frozen, an egg won't age by a minute for the years it's stored. When and if you later have your eggs thawed, they'll need testing in a laboratory. I think we need a doctor for the next bit. Susan Bewley is a former obstetrician and gynaecologist.
They have to be mixed with sperm in a Petri dish. You have to then have a timed embryo transfer, and it might not work the first time. You might have to do it a second time or a third time. But these are procedures using transvaginal ultrasound. So it's not straightforward. And you're also putting the embryo back into an older body. So you're getting the biological response of an older body, which is not so capable of handling a pregnancy as a younger body.
So is it basically IVF that you're then having?
Yes, you're not having sex with the egg that's younger back in your body.
OK, do you think most women understand that? Because we know that IVF's complicated. Many people know friends whose lives are really quite devastated while they're having IVF. Do you think that people understand that it is IVF that is going to be the end result of egg freezing?
I suspect not. I think the reality only comes when you're there later, not now when you're putting things off.
So I would have thought that the first question that you ask is, what are the chances of success?
Well, depends on women's age. Women who are younger have got a better chance of success because, as we very well know, that the quality of egg declines as women get older. Miscarriage rates go up as well. And so I think the discussion is not just about the success, but the safety, the risks, the cost, all of it put together. Then how does she want to take it forward? It seems unfair that the society that creates educational, economical, and professional conditions that encourage women to delay motherhood want to discourage from using technological solutions to bypass biological inequity, which is early loss of fertility for women.
That's so complicated, though, isn't it? I mean, particularly for this kind of frontier generation of women who might see egg freezing as exactly that, a kind of balancing out of the gender inequality. Because surely we don't yet know the real results of egg freezing. We're pulling these kind of facts out of the future, aren't we?
Well, we need to look at the global results and use that information to give women realistic success rates.
So do you use that in your clinic? I mean, are you using results from a different country to inform the patients here?
We use a combination, okay? We actually say to them what is published so far and what is applicable to her specifically based on those results.
What began to concern me was just how hard it is to find your way through the available data.
So in the United States, the American Society of Reproductive Medicine, they have actually published studies showing the success rates of egg freezing and vitrification. They are seeing upwards of and around a 90% successful thaw and implantation rate.
So, sorry, just to be certain of this, the 90% success rate relates to successful reimplantation or successful live births at the end of the pregnancy?
You know, I don't want to misspeak with any statistics. I can say, though, that there are studies that are showing high success rates of the thaw process and the quality of those eggs, which have then gone on to be fertilized and implanted.
Now, I have just located the most recent ASRM report here, and that 90% success rate that Karen from Progeny mentions is the most recent data on the thawing of frozen eggs, but not the fertilisation, implantation or live birth rate. And see, here's the problem. If I was sitting in a clinic's waiting room flicking through a nice shiny brochure which said there was a 90% success rate attached to egg freezing, well, I'd probably think, well, hey, shall I paint the nursery blue or pink? So this, and this is an important one too, is the statement that has just come to me from the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Authority. That's the regulator for fertility clinics. So they say egg freezing is on the rise, but success rates are still low, an average of 8 births each year in the UK from thawed eggs, and that's just between 2008 and 2013. They go on to say that new freezing techniques appear to have improved the chance of future success, but it's still too early to know that for certain.
I'd been in a relationship for a couple of years. I was in my early 30s.
Georgina.
I was worried that maybe things weren't moving particularly quickly and it was starting to affect the way I thought about things. I'd seen an advert that suggested that if you were willing to donate your eggs, which I'd come to the conclusion that I definitely was, you could get money off having your eggs frozen.
Georgina's first cycle gave her just 4 eggs for freezing. 10 or 12 eggs is what you're aiming for in one cycle, though the British Fertility Society now suggests 40 eggs and multiple cycles are a better guarantee of a baby.
For quite a long period of my life, well over a year, it occupied a lot of my brain because you have to plan when you're going to go through these sort of several weeks each time. There's an element of recovery afterwards. There are, potential side effects of the drugs and all the rest of it. There's the financial element. So for me, it went from being something that was a concern that I had to being quite an overwhelming chunk of my life for a period of time. So it did have quite a big negative impact.
This has all been paid for by you, hasn't it? What's the total cost so far?
The headline number that I was given when I went into the first round was £3,000. When it became apparent that one round was never going to be enough for me, I spoke to them and I was able to negotiate a slightly better deal, but it still ended up costing me nearer £10,000.
So we've spoken to one woman. She didn't attend your clinic. It was a different clinic where she came through the whole process very surprised at the increasing cost.
Yeah, well, look, the important thing is to give the full cost to the patient and to tailor the injection protocol for her. So if we tailor from the beginning, because there are lots of prediction factors that we can use, like her age, her egg reserve, as we have calculated. If we use those prediction factors and tailor the dose for her, then we are more likely to achieve the success when it comes to the quality and quantity of eggs that we would like to obtain for freezing in one cycle. So I think the important thing is to help women to make an informed choice about their own situation. And that is where, a free open days, consultations, having a fertility MOT or to get their egg reserve checked, to get the reassurance, to relieve their anxiety about the problem. Or it may happen sometimes by freezing their eggs if it is necessary.
For those of you that are interested in exploring egg freezing, I think
it's a weekday evening in central London, and this is Smart Egg. Drinks and chats with health professionals and like-minded young women who want their fertility to work for them. That is what the website says.
A 41-year-old coming through who froze their eggs 10 years ago, you'll have the potential of becoming pregnant of that of the 31-year-old.
Tickets are £18, and these kind of egg-freezing info socials get sold out fast.
The eggs are aspirated from your ovary.
Quite quickly, the event focuses on egg freezing. Laura is in two minds.
I have a stable partner who's actually quite a bit older. I definitely would like to have children, and he's kind of on the yes, but slightly perhaps slower timelines than mine. And I think I would do it in a heartbeat if I could fund it in some way. It's a bit like when you're up at night and you can't sleep, you almost write down a to-do list of everything to get out of your head. To me, freezing an egg would be the same as that. It's a sort of physical, just put it in a box and we'll think about it a bit later, rather than it sort of whirling around your head at night.
Susan Bewley again.
We can see the advertisements in magazines, and we certainly can see from over the Atlantic that there are targeting of young people in universities to go to egg parties. We're hearing people advertising, why don't you give this as a present to your child who's age 30 who hasn't had children. So I think a new social norm is being created that it would be wise to do this. And I think the presentation of it as insurance is wrong. It's actually a kind of gamble on planned infertility, which seems challenged to biology.
Of my 11 eggs, 9 thawed. Of those 9, 6 fertilized. And from the period of, it was about 5 days, my 6 embryos turned into 1 embryo that was available for testing. And I lost it. And I think that I went in so sort of positively.
When I first spoke to Bridget, she was on the cusp of having her 11 frozen eggs thawed. Genetic testing for abnormalities only happens once an egg has been fertilised, and that means that women like Bridget don't know whether they're pinning their hopes on bad eggs.
Mine were on ice for 5 years, and you sort of disengage from that whole process, and I think that I sort of lulled myself into thinking, of course these eggs are going to work. And now that I'm in this position of something potentially not working, it's devastating, and I can't at this point retrieve any more eggs.
By the time this programme goes out, she might be pregnant or she might not. But despite stories like this, public interest in egg freezing just keeps growing. In a recent UK poll by the Liminal Space and ICM, 84% of young women aged 18 to 24 agreed that egg freezing is justifiable to improve opportunities for career progression, and 37% said it should be a corporate benefit. So if the saying goes that when America sneezes, we catch a cold, when Silicon Valley presses play on the Ghetto Blaster, 48, you know, a lot of people here start dancing.
I'm Tushar Agarwal. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Hubble.
You are one of the first companies that we could find in the UK who is looking at putting egg freezing into some kind of corporate healthcare plan.
I think I'd say that we're open to the idea. And the reason for that is we want to help people love where they work. And actually a part of that is how your employees feel when they work in your business. And is there any way that you can help them achieve not just their professional goals, but also their personal goals?
Are you very influenced, though, by the fact that some of the tech giants, Apple and Facebook namely, have already put this into corporate healthcare?
I think for me that serves as a validation. Apple and Facebook are of this generation, the companies that companies like ourselves look up to. And so, yes, if those names had not done that, then probably we wouldn't be having this discussion.
Yeah. You've used exactly the right word. It's a validation. So effectively, if Apple or Facebook had said, do you know what, we're going to pioneer research into artificial wombs that could be implanted in men so that they could take the responsibility for pregnancy and birth, that would be something that you would do too.
I think that sounds like quite an interesting idea. So on an intellectual level, I might be interested in in looking into it. But it's one of those things where we say that as a joke, but in the next 10 to 20 years, the way technology is shifting, that may not be so ridiculous after all.
There is a kind of trickle-down effect, isn't there, that if big companies start offering this, they create a market and women actually become quite vulnerable in all of that. My fertility really shouldn't be governed by someone else wanting to make a business out of it. And there is a link from your website to one where egg freezing is described as the perfect 30th birthday present. Do you think all of the pressure that headlines like that create is actually something that the clinics themselves need to be tackling?
I think the headline that particular journalist wrote was because parents consider giving a deposit for mortgage, okay? Parents consider giving university fees, a number of things. I have also met women where the parents have brought them or grandparents have brought them because they don't want to lose the chance of being a grandparent and all that. So women need to thrive in everything they want to, in absolutely every dream they want to achieve. And part of that, for many women, is having children with their own eggs.
And that was my dream. When I left NYC, I went on to have 2 children with my own eggs. And not a day goes past that I'm not grateful for them. But even knowing all I know now, if I was 32 again and I was in Silicon Valley wearing chinos and eating only cauliflower rice, would I make my life choices based on a slim chance of success? Would I do it anyway? Well, yes, I probably would. Because the promise that it might just work out fine, a family, a career, happiness ever after, well, who turns that down?
It's more empowering to be able to try something and go through with it. And if it's an option down the line, that's great. And if it's not, well, at least we got the chance to try.
In the future, egg freezing may well mean that a whole generation of women can have more of a say about when they have their children. But it still doesn't address access to decent childcare, a confident return to work, the fact that an employer might look at you in a different way because you have a womb, and the bloke doing the same job, probably for more money, at the desk next to yours, doesn't have all of this placed upon him.
I think it's certainly that the whole experience did have an impact on my relationship at the time. And it wasn't a positive one. That relationship's ended now, so I'm in a position where I feel like it's, having children isn't really on my agenda because I almost don't want to put myself in another position of being massively disappointed.
But having the eggs frozen and there doesn't make you feel more positive about the future. You're saying exactly the opposite.
I think the issue is the statistical probability of success, and the statistical probability of success is a low one. So for me, I was going to say putting all my eggs in one basket. I can't say that. No!
Do you know what, Georgina, at some stage, somebody has to say it. I give it to you.
The kind of people who are going to do really, really well with egg freezing are the kind of people that have loads and loads of eggs and don't have a fertility problem in the first place. So I find it difficult to believe that that represents most women who are undergoing this procedure. That's the issue.
And that is Georgina's story. I wish her all the luck in the world.
The Great Egg Freeze was a testbed production for BBC Radio 4, and it was made over quite a long period of time in order to follow these women's stories, like Bridget, who we heard had just one chance of pregnancy, one egg. When Seriously spoke to Sarah Cudden, the producer, it was the first question we asked. Did it work out for Bridget? And the answer, unfortunately, was no, she's not pregnant. Sarah told us that she and presenter Fee Glover kept meeting people who had the mindset that egg freezing is a simple miracle that lets you put things off, without realising the complexity of what it might entail in the future. I didn't really know that much about egg freezing before I listened to that doc. But I feel like I've learnt so much, and I know it's going to come up time and time again in discussions with my friends. You can join the conversation. Just use the hashtag R4Seriously. And don't forget to press subscribe on your podcast app too. Join me, Rhianna Dillon, next time for another seriously interesting story told a little sideways. Just before you go, I have a teeny favour to ask. The British Podcast Awards are taking place soon, and we would be eternally grateful if you could pop over to britishpodcastawards.com and vote for Seriously as your favourite podcast. Or, any other podcast you like, but seriously. No, seriously. Thank you very much.
This is the BBC.